What happens when the man who promised to love you forever, the millionaire who gave you a life of unimaginable luxury, tells you to your face that the life of your unborn child isn't worth the money in a sterile hospital corridor with the clock ticking on a life-saving surgery? One woman is shattered by her husband's icy words. She's alone, pregnant, and facing an impossible choice. But in her darkest hour, a shadow from the past emerges. A mysterious man with a suitcase full of cash and a secret that could destroy everything. This isn't just a story about money. It's about the price of love, the cost of betrayal, and a rescue that came from the most unexpected place imaginable. The penthouse felt less like a home and more like a museum exhibit on wealth. Perched 50 stories above the glittering chaos of the city, every surface in Julian Croft's apartment was either polished marble, gleaming chrome, or rare imported wood. It was a space designed to be admired, not lived in. And lately, Amelia Croft felt more like one of its acquisitions than its mistress. She traced the rim of a porcelain teacup, her gaze lost somewhere in the sprawling metropolis below. 6 months pregnant, she felt a profound and growing disconnect from the woman she was a year ago. That woman, a passionate art curator with a love for dusty archives and impressionist paintings, had been swept off her feet by Julian. He was everything the art world wasn't: decisive, powerful, a titan of finance who moved markets with a single phone call. He'd pursued her with a relentless, dizzying intensity, showering her with gifts, flying her to Paris for a weekend, and making her believe his sharp, calculated world had a space for her softer, more colorful one. She had fallen in love with the idea of him, with the security he represented, and with the rare moments when his guard would drop, revealing a flicker of vulnerability she mistook for depth. Their marriage was a whirlwind of black-tie galas, charity auctions, and carefully curated social events. Amelia played her part, the beautiful, cultured wife, on the arm of the brilliant Julian Croft. But the gilded cage began to feel smaller each day. Julian's affection was conditional, his praise tied to her performance. He corrected her conversational topics, vetted her guest lists, and slowly, methodically isolated her from her old, less suitable friends. The pregnancy was her secret joy, a private rebellion. This child, their child, would be a person, not a performance. This tiny, fluttering life inside her was a promise of real, unconditional love. She imagined reading classic children's books to him in a nursery filled with whimsical art, a stark contrast to the cold, modern aesthetic of the rest of the penthouse. Julian, however, saw the pregnancy differently. For him, it was about legacy, an heir, the continuation of the Croft name. He had already hired consultants to map out the child's entire life, from the most exclusive preschools to Ivy League universities. He spoke of the baby as the asset, or the successor. The first sign of trouble came during a routine 20-week ultrasound. The sonographer's cheerful demeanor slowly faded, replaced by a focused, tight-lipped silence. She called in a specialist, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, whose gentle eyes couldn't hide the gravity of the situation. "Mrs. Croft," Dr. Sharma began, her voice soft. "We've detected an anomaly. It's something called a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, or CDH. It's a rare condition where the diaphragm doesn't fully form, allowing abdominal organs to move into the chest cavity." Amelia's blood ran cold. She gripped the thin paper sheet covering her. "What does that mean?" "For the baby, it means the lungs don't have enough space to develop properly," Dr. Sharma explained patiently. "It's a very serious condition, but it's not without hope. There is a pioneering fetal surgery. It's complex and it's expensive, but it can significantly increase the baby's chances of survival. The world tilted. One moment she was dreaming of lullabies, the next she was trapped in a nightmare of medical jargon and terrifying possibilities. Julian was in a board meeting when she called, his voice clipped and impatient. "Amelia, what is it? I'm in the middle of a hostile takeover." Through her tears, she explained the diagnosis. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a silence so cold and empty, it felt like a void. "Send me the medical report," he said, finally, his tone devoid of any emotion. "I'll have my people look at it." Not our people, my people. The next few days were a blur of more tests, specialists, and consultations. The consensus was the same: the baby needed in utero surgery, and soon. The top facility recommended a place with the highest success rate for this specific delicate procedure was the renowned Bumrungrad International Hospital in Bangkok, Thailand. It was a beacon of modern medicine, a place where the world's wealthy went for cutting-edge treatments. The cost, the administration officer informed them coolly over a video call, would be staggering. The initial estimate, including the specialized surgical team, neonatal intensive care, and extended hospital stay for Amelia, was hovering around $250,000 with the potential for more. $250,000. To Amelia, it was an astronomical sum. To Julian, it was the equivalent of a rounding error on his quarterly earnings report. It was less than he'd spent on a vintage Patek Philippe watch at an auction last month. The night before they were supposed to make the final decision and wire the deposit, Amelia found Julian in his study. He wasn't looking at the medical files she'd so carefully arranged. He was staring at a stock ticker, his face illuminated by the cold blue light of the screen. "Julian," she whispered, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "We need to approve the transfer. The hospital is waiting." He didn't turn around. "I've reviewed the data." "The data, Julian, this is our baby, not a balance sheet." He finally swiveled in his high-backed leather chair. His face was a mask of detached calculation. "The prognosis, even with the surgery, is not guaranteed. There's a significant risk of long-term complications, respiratory issues, and developmental delays. The projected cost-benefit analysis is unfavorable." Amelia felt the air leave her lungs. Cost-benefit analysis. Are you listening to yourself? This is our child's life. Emotion has no place in a decision of this magnitude, he said, his voice flat. It is an unacceptable risk. We can try again. The genetic lottery will be more favorable next time. The phrase struck her like a physical blow. The genetic lottery, as if their child was a flawed product to be discarded. The love she thought she had for him curdled into something cold and sharp in her chest. The vulnerability she once saw in him was revealed for what it truly was, a hollow space where a heart should have been. "No," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "You can't be serious." "I am perfectly serious," he replied, standing up and adjusting his cufflinks, a gesture of finality. "I will not be funding this procedure. It is a poor investment. We are not doing it." He walked past her, the scent of his expensive cologne filling the air. She could no longer breathe. He didn't look at her, didn't touch her. He just left her standing there, a ghost in her own home, with the death sentence for her unborn child hanging in the air between them. The next morning, Amelia woke up alone. A note was on Julian's pillow, written on his personal stationery. "Amelia, I have flown to Zurich for urgent business. My decision is final. Do not attempt to contact me about this matter. The accounts have been placed on a restricted access protocol. Focus on your own recovery. Julian." her credit cards, the joint accounts. He had cut her off. He hadn't just refused to pay, he had made it impossible for her to pay herself. She collapsed onto the bed, a single guttural sob escaping her lips. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about the breathtaking cruelty. He was leaving her and their baby to die. But as the initial shock subsided, something else took its place. A cold, hard fury. He had underestimated her. He saw her as another one of his beautiful, fragile possessions. He was about to learn that she was not. She booked a flight to Bangkok with the last of her personal savings, a small account Julian had never known about. It was barely enough for the ticket and a few nights in a cheap hotel, but it was a start. She was going to that hospital. She was going to stand on their doorstep and beg if she had to. She would not let her child die because of a poor investment. The sterile, air-conditioned chill of Bumrungrad International Hospital was a world away from the humid, chaotic energy of the Bangkok streets. The hospital lobby was more like a five-star hotel with plush seating, a concierge desk, and a quiet hum of hushed, multilingual conversations. Wealthy patrons from the Middle East, Europe, and Asia drifted through the halls, their faces etched with worry, but secure in the knowledge that money could buy the best care on the planet. For Amelia, it was a palace of unattainable hope. She had spent the last 48 hours in a daze of desperation. Her small hotel room felt like a prison cell, the city outside, a taunting reminder of her isolation. She had tried calling Julian's private number, but it went straight to a disconnected tone. She called his office, only to be stonewalled by a phalanx of secretaries who had clearly been given their orders. "Mr. Croft is unavailable," they repeated in a monotonous loop. She even called her mother-in-law, Eleanor Croft, a woman as cold and imposing as her son, who had listened silently before, saying, "Julian is a logical man, Amelia. Perhaps you should listen to his judgment," and hanging up. Now, she stood before the International Patient Admissions Desk, her hands trembling as she clutched her medical file. The administrator, a polished woman in a crisp uniform, looked at her with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. "Mrs. Croft," the woman said, her Thai accent soft, but her words firm. "We have your file, and Dr. Somsak, our head of fetal medicine, has reviewed it. He agrees that time is of the essence. However, we cannot proceed with scheduling the surgery without the required deposit." "I know," Amelia said, her voice barely a whisper. I'm trying to arrange it. There's been a problem with the bank transfer." It was a weak lie, and they both knew it. "The deposit is 7,500,000 Thai baht." The administrator stated, the number sounding even more impossible in the local currency. "We require it 24 hours prior to the procedure. Dr. Somsak's schedule is very tight. If we cannot confirm the funds by this afternoon, we will have to give the surgical slot to the next patient on the waiting list." Tears pricked at Amelia's eyes. The next patient. Another family, another life, hanging in the balance. But this was her baby. "Please," she begged, leaning forward, the professional facade of the room, making her desperation feel all the more raw and out of place. "Isn't there anything you can do, a payment plan, anything?" The administrator's expression softened, but her hands were tied. "Ma'am, our policy is absolute. I am very sorry." Defeated Amelia stumbled away from the desk. She found an empty chair in a secluded corner of the sprawling lobby, away from the hopeful families and the confident stride of the doctors. She pulled her knees to her chest, hiding her face as the silent tears began to fall. The weight of it all was crushing her. She had failed. Her baby was going to die because his own father, a man who could buy a hospital wing without noticing the expense, had deemed him worthless. The future she had dreamed of, the nursery, the bedtime stories, the tiny hand in hers, was dissolving into a grey, featureless fog. She sat there for what felt like an eternity, lost in her grief. She didn't notice the man who sat down in the chair opposite her. He didn't speak at first, simply sat there, creating a quiet, unobtrusive presence. After a few minutes, a calm, deep voice broke through her sorrow. "Mrs. Croft." Amelia looked up, startled. Her vision was blurry with tears. She saw a man in his late 30s, dressed not in the flamboyant designer labels Julian favored, but in a simple, well-tailored dark grey suit. He had kind, intelligent eyes that held a hint of a storm deep within them. His face was handsome, but it was a face etched with experience, not privilege. There was a quiet intensity about him that was both unnerving and strangely comforting. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, wiping her eyes. "Do I know you?" "No," he said, his voice even. "But I know your husband. My name is Marcus Vance." The name meant nothing to her. Julian had never mentioned a Marcus Vance. I don't understand." "Julian and I were business partners a long time ago." Marcus said, his gaze unwavering. "He's not a man who likes to be reminded of his past." He gestured towards the admissions desk. "I overheard your conversation. The surgery for your child." Amelia stiffened. She felt a flush of shame, of being exposed in her moment of ultimate vulnerability. "Please, I'd rather not talk about it." "Julian refused to pay, didn't he?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Amelia flinched as if he'd struck her. She couldn't form a reply, only nodding mutely, a fresh wave of tears, threatening. Marcus's expression didn't change, but a muscle in his jaw tightened. He seemed to understand Julian in a way that chilled her to the bone. He reached down beside his chair and lifted a heavy-looking, black aluminum briefcase onto his lap, the kind with combination locks. With a few deft clicks, he opened it. He turned the briefcase towards her. Amelia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. It was filled with cash, neat, tightly packed bahastamax of US dollars. It was an impossible amount of money, more than she had ever seen in one place. It was a ransom, a fortune, a miracle. Who are you?" she stammered, her mind reeling. "I'm a man who believes debts should be paid," Marcus said softly, his eyes locking onto hers. "Julian Croft owes me a great deal, more than this. Consider this a down payment." He closed the briefcase and stood up. "That should be more than enough to cover the deposit and any initial complications. Go back to the desk. Tell them you wish to pay in cash." He held the briefcase out to her. It was heavy, solid, real. This wasn't a dream. "I can't," she whispered, overwhelmed. "Why would you do this?" "Because no child should have to pay for the sins of their father," he said, his voice laced with an old, deep-seated anger that was clearly directed at Julian. "And because I know what it feels like to have everything taken from you by that man. Go. Don't waste any more time." Without another word, he placed the briefcase on the chair beside her, gave a slight formal nod, and walked away. He didn't look back. He just disappeared into the flow of people in the lobby, leaving Amelia sitting there with a fortune at her feet and a whirlwind of questions in her heart. For a moment, she was paralyzed. Then the administrator's words echoed in her head, "We will have to give the surgical slot to the next patient." Adrenaline surged through her. She grabbed the handle of the briefcase, its weight a shocking, grounding reality. She walked back to the admissions desk, her stride no longer defeated, but purposeful. The administrator looked up, her eyes widening in surprise as Amelia heaved the heavy case onto the marble countertop. "I'd like to pay the deposit," Amelia said, her voice clear and strong. "In cash." The stunned silence that followed was the most satisfying sound she had ever heard. The surgery was a success. For 8 agonizing hours, Amelia had paced the private waiting room. The hospital had provided a space as luxurious as it was sterile. Her friend from her university days, Chloe, had flown in from Singapore. On the first available flight, a whirlwind of righteous fury and fierce loyalty. Chloe, a sharp-witted journalist who had always been wary of Julian, now held Amelia's hand, her presence a solid anchor in the storm. When Dr. Somsak finally appeared, his surgical mask hanging around his neck and his face tired but smiling, the relief was so overwhelming that Amelia's knees buckled. "The procedure went as well as we could have hoped," he announced. "We were able to reposition the organs and place the balloon in his trachea. The next few weeks are critical for lung growth, but the first and most difficult step is over. He's a little fighter. A boy." Amelia wept, not with sorrow, but with a tidal wave of gut-wrenching, soul-cleansing relief. In the days that followed, a new reality set in. Amelia was confined to the hospital for monitoring her world, shrinking to the size of her room. The rhythmic beat of fetal heart monitors her constant companion. The cash from Marcus Vance's briefcase had been counted, verified, and deposited, creating a small stir among the hospital's administrative staff. They now treated her with a deferential curiosity, the woman whose anonymous benefactor had paid for a miracle in cash. Julian, meanwhile, had finally shown his hand. A courier delivered a thick envelope to her hospital room. Inside were divorce papers already signed by him. His petition cited irreconcilable differences, and in a move of pure, calculated malice, included a motion to contest paternity, demanding a DNA test after the child's birth. He was trying to build a narrative that the child wasn't his, a preemptive strike to justify his abandonment. His cruelty knew no bounds. He had frozen every joint asset, leaving the remaining balance in the hospital fund as the only money she had in the world. Chloe, reading the legal documents with a thunderous expression, was livid. The nerve of that monster contesting paternity after he demanded a perfect heir for the Croft legacy. He's not just divorcing you, Amelia, he's trying to erase you. But the legal papers, which would have shattered her a week ago, now felt distant. The real mystery wasn't Julian's cruelty, that was now a known quantity, but the identity of her savior. Who was Marcus Vance? 2 days later, he provided the answer himself. He appeared at her hospital room door, holding a small bouquet of white orchids. He looked just as he had in the lobby, calm, composed, but with that same deep, turbulent energy beneath the surface. Chloe immediately stood up, her posture protective. "Can we help you?" "My name is Marcus Vance," he said, his eyes on Amelia. "I came to see how you and your son are doing." Amelia's heart hammered in her chest. "Mr. Vance, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my baby's life." "I'm glad to hear the surgery was a success," he said, placing the orchids on her bedside table. "And please call me Marcus." Chloe, ever the journalist, cut straight to the chase. "Who are you? And why give a stranger $250,000? Marcus pulled a chair over his movements, deliberate. He looked at Amelia, his gaze searching as if gauging her strength. "I told you Julian and I were partners," he began, his voice low. "It was 10 years ago. I was young, ambitious, and frankly, a little naive. I had developed a proprietary algorithm for high-frequency trading. It was revolutionary at the time. I needed capital to launch it, and a mutual acquaintance introduced me to Julian Croft. He paused, a shadow of a bitter memory crossing his face. Julian was brilliant. He saw the potential immediately. We formed a company. I was the brains, the innovator. He was the finance guy, the rainmaker. For a year, it was perfect. We were making incredible returns. I thought we were building an empire together. I trusted him. He wasn't just my business partner. I considered him my friend. Amelia listened, captivated, a portrait of her husband emerging that was both completely alien and horribly familiar. The algorithm was the company's sole asset, Marcus continued. It was locked down on a secure server accessible only by the two of us. One weekend, while I was out of the country visiting my sick mother, the server was breached. The algorithm was stolen. By Monday morning, our company was worthless. Our clients panicked. Our backers pulled out. We were ruined. And you think Julian did it? Chloe asked, leaning forward. I don't think. I know, Marcus said, his voice turning to steel. The breach was internal. It was made to look like a corporate espionage job, a hack from a rival firm. But the digital forensics, which I paid for out of my own pocket after I had lost everything, showed the download originated from an IP address traced back to a private holding company. A holding company that Julian, through a series of shell corporations, secretly controlled. Amelia felt a wave of nausea. He stole my work, my creation, and sold it to a major investment bank in Switzerland for a fortune. That sale was the foundation of his wealth, the money he used to build Croft Enterprises, the money that bought your penthouse, your clothes, the life he gave you. It was all built on my ruin. He didn't just steal my company, he stole my future. I was forced into bankruptcy. I lost my home. The scandal made me untouchable in the financial world. He erased me. The word erased hung in the air, the same word Chloe had used to describe what Julian was trying to do to Amelia. How did you come back from that? Amelia asked, her voice barely a whisper. A flicker of a pained smile touched Marcus's lips. Slowly, painfully, I left the country, took on a new name for a while. I worked odd jobs in technology consulting in places where the Croft name meant nothing. I saved every penny. I never stopped innovating. I built new things, smaller things under the radar. I slowly, painstakingly rebuilt my life. And I never ever took my eye off Julian Croft. You were watching him, Amelia realized aloud. For 10 years, Marcus confirmed. I watched him build his empire on my stolen dreams. I read about his triumphs in the financial papers. I saw his picture at galas with you on his arm. I knew everything about him. I was waiting for the right moment. Not for revenge, for justice. And this was it. Chloe asked, her skepticism softening into awe. Saving his wife and child. When I learned he was refusing to pay for his own child's surgery, it was a level of monstrousness that even I didn't think he was capable of. Marcus said, his eyes finding Amelia's. To him, a child with a potential flaw is a poor investment. A business partner who trusts him is a liability to be eliminated. It's the same mindset. He destroys anything that doesn't serve his purpose. I couldn't let him do it again. I couldn't let him destroy your son. He looked down at his hands. The money I gave you, it's a fraction of what he took from me. But using it to save a life he was willing to throw away, that felt like the only meaningful way to get a piece of my own back. Silence filled the room, thick with the weight of his decade-long struggle. Amelia finally understood. This wasn't charity. It wasn't random kindness. It was a calculated act of poetic justice, a ghost from Julian's past rising up to balance the scales. Suddenly, a key piece of the puzzle clicked into place for her. Julian, he found out about the CDH before the specialist told me, didn't he? She asked, a horrifying suspicion dawning. Marcus nodded slowly. Julian leaves nothing to chance. For a man obsessed with a perfect heir, I'd bet my life he paid for advanced, off-the-books genetic screening the moment you were pregnant. The kind that flags any potential abnormalities long before a standard ultrasound would. He knew about the baby's condition for weeks. He was just waiting for the official diagnosis to play his hand. The final piece of his monstrous plan was laid bare. He hadn't reacted in shock. He had been prepared. His refusal wasn't a spontaneous act of cruelty, but a premeditated strategy. He wanted to discard her and the flawed baby so he could start over a clean slate with his stolen fortune intact. Amelia looked at the divorce papers on the table, at the cruel, baseless accusation of infidelity. It was all a lie, a smokescreen to hide a truth so vile, so inhuman, that no one would ever think to look for it. The grief and fear she had felt were burned away, replaced by a cold, diamond-hard resolve. He wasn't just going to divorce her. He wasn't going to erase her. He's not going to get away with this, she said. Her voice quiet, but vibrating with a newfound strength. He picked a fight with the wrong mother. Marcus Vance looked at her, and for the first time, he gave a genuine, full smile. No, he said. He certainly did not. The journey back to the penthouse was a strange pilgrimage into a past that felt a lifetime away. As the taxi cut through the city's bustling streets, Amelia stared out at the blur of life, yet her focus was entirely inward. She was a different woman from the one who had fled this city in a desperate, tear-soaked haze. The grief that had hollowed her out had been replaced by something far more formidable, a cold, crystalline sense of purpose. This wasn't about revenge, a concept that felt too chaotic and emotional. This was about justice. It was for Leo, a son who would never know his father's cruelty, and it was for Marcus, a man whose life had been stolen in the dark. Her final preparations with Chloe and Marcus had been like a council of war. Chloe, the fierce journalist, had coached her on poise and delivery. Don't shout, Amelia, she had insisted. Let your words be the weapons. A quiet truth is louder than a frantic lie. Look them in the eye. Do not let them see you falter. Marcus had provided the ammunition, the specific, irrefutable facts that would act as bullets. He had laid out the timeline of his betrayal, providing the name of the obscure Swiss holding company and the precise dates of the illicit data transfer. He had even, through his own deep-dive research, found traces of Julian's inquiry into a high-risk, off-the-books prenatal screening clinic. Each detail was a stone she would use to bring the giant down. When she stepped into the colossal, marble-floored lobby of her former home, the air of opulence felt different. It no longer seemed aspirational. It seemed suffocating, a mausoleum built to honor greed. The doorman, a man she had once exchanged pleasantries with, daily, now averted his gaze, his discomfort a palpable thing. He knew. In this world, scandal traveled faster than light. She gave him a slight confident nod and stepped into the private elevator. The silent, swift ascent felt like a countdown. She was rising to meet her demons. But this time, she was not the one who should be afraid. The apartment was just as she remembered, vast, silent, and impeccably clean. The afternoon sun, glinting off surfaces that were never touched by human hands. It was a showroom, for a life that had never truly been lived. She walked to the center of the immense living room, positioning herself with the sprawling city skyline as her backdrop, and she waited. Julian and his mother arrived with the punctuality of royalty. Eleanor Croft was an architectural marvel of a woman dressed in a severe navy Chanel suit that seemed woven from disapproval. Her silver hair was coiled into a perfect chignon, and her gaze was as sharp and cold as the diamonds on her fingers. Julian walked beside her, radiating a smug, predatory confidence. He had won. He had excised the flawed elements from his life and was now here with his matriarchal seal of approval to sweep up the final remains. He saw Amelia standing there, her posture straight, her expression unreadable, and he mistook her composure for resignation. "Amelia," he began, his voice a silken sheath over a steel blade of condescension. "I'm relieved to see you've decided to be reasonable. Mother and I were just discussing the most dignified way to conclude this unfortunate chapter. A clean break is best for everyone." "Unfortunate is one word for it," Eleanor added, her eyes sweeping over Amelia in a clinical assessment that found her utterly wanting. "Though frankly, Julian, this is what happens when one marries for novelty rather than for substance. However, we are prepared to be generous considering your circumstances." The sheer breathtaking arrogance of them was almost impressive. They saw her as a problem to be managed, a line item to be closed. "Save it, Julian," Amelia said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through their self-congratulatory monologue with the clean, sharp sound of shattering glass. The sudden shift in power was immediate and visceral. Both Julian and Eleanor stopped, their condescending smiles freezing on their faces. "I will not have you take that tone," Eleanor snapped, recovering first. "You are in no position to be making demands, young lady. You are a guest in this house." "On the contrary, Eleanor," Amelia replied, her gaze unwavering, as she used the older woman's first name, a calculated breach of protocol. "This house was built on lies, which makes me feel perfectly at home today. And I am in the only position that matters, the position of truth." Julian let out a short, ugly laugh, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. The truth is that you're trying to leverage a child of questionable parentage into a lifelong payday. It's a pathetic and transparent ploy, and frankly, it's beneath even you." This was the opening she had waited for. The accusation that had been designed to silence and shame her would now be his undoing. "My son is fine," she said, her voice dropping slightly, drawing them in. "He's a beautiful, healthy boy. His surgery at Bumrungrad was a complete success." Julian's confident smirk faltered. A flicker of genuine shock of thwarted design crossed his face before he could mask it. "What? How is that possible? I made it clear." "You made your cruelty clear?" "Yes," Amelia interrupted. "But a good Samaritan stepped in where a father failed. But he isn't who we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about a man named Marcus Vance." The name landed in the silent room with the force of a physical blow. The change in Julian was instantaneous and total. The blood drained from his face, leaving behind a sickly, pallid sheen. The hand that was adjusting his tie began to tremble, and his eyes darted around the room, as if searching for an escape route. He looked at that moment like what he was, a common thief, dressed in a $1,000 suit. I don't know any Marcus Vance," he stammered the lie, thin and brittle. Eleanor looked from Amelia's stony face to her son's sudden panic, a frown of confusion creasing her brow. "Don't you?" Amelia took a deliberate step forward, pressing her advantage. "He was your business partner, Julian, your friend. the brilliant mind behind the trading algorithm you built your entire empire on. Or should I say the algorithm you stole? This is insane, Julian blustered, finding a sliver of his bravado. He turned to his mother, his voice rising in pitch. She's unstable, mother grieving and desperate. She's concocting fantasies, hiring con artists to extort us. It's a shakedown. Is it? Amelia's voice remained icily calm. Then perhaps you can explain Ethelred Holdings AG. It's a shell corporation registered in Zug, Switzerland. Does that name ring a bell? It was incorporated on October 14th, 10 years ago. What a remarkable coincidence, given that Marcus Vance's secure servers were wiped clean 2 days prior on the 12th. He has the digital forensic reports, Julian. The ones showing the data transfer wasn't an external hack, but an internal download routed through a proxy chain that leads directly to you. She recited the facts with cold precision, each detail another nail in his coffin. Julian stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing silently, no lies left to tell. He was exposed, and the mask of the financial titan had fallen away to reveal the frightened charlatan beneath. Julian, Eleanor demanded, her voice sharp as flint, her patrician confidence beginning to crack. What is this woman talking about? She's lying. The documents are fake. He yelled, his desperation making him sloppy. Amelia never took her eyes off him. Then let's test that theory. I'm sure the SEC and the Swiss Financial Market Supervisory Authority would be very interested in examining Marcus's evidence. Shall we make the call? The threat hung in the air, heavy and absolute. The name of those regulatory bodies was enough to make Julian flinch, as if he'd been struck. Eleanor watched her son, her intelligent eyes missing nothing, the sweat on his temple, the tremor in his hands, the utter absence of righteous indignation. She was a woman who valued strength and control above all else, and in that moment, her son displayed neither. She was seeing the truth, and it was beginning to horrify her. Amelia let the silence stretch, allowing the poison of the first revelation to do its work before she administered the second, far more lethal dose. But you know, she said, her voice softening into something more dangerous, more personal, stealing a man's future, a man's company, that's just business to you, isn't it? An acceptable loss for an acceptable gain. Let's talk about something else you tried to steal. Let's talk about our son. She paused, ensuring she had both of their complete horrified attention. You didn't just refuse the surgery after the doctors told me the diagnosis, did you, Julian? You knew for weeks. You knew almost from the beginning. She saw the final flicker of defiance die in his eyes, replaced by pure animal terror. You paid for a private screening at the Genesis Clinic in New York. She continued, her voice a low, damning indictment. A high-risk, off-the-books genetic sequencing test. You got the report in your encrypted personal email on a Tuesday, 3 full weeks before that 20-week ultrasound. You read it, you saw the word hernia, and you deleted it thinking it was buried forever. But digital ghosts are hard to exorcise, aren't they? Eleanor Croft made a small, strangled sound, her manicured hand flying to her pearls. He knew, Amelia said, turning her gaze to the older woman, making her a party to the verdict. He knew our baby had a serious but treatable condition, and he said nothing. He watched me plan a nursery. He listened to me talk about our future. All the while, he was formulating an exit strategy. He was preparing to discard us. He called our baby, his own flesh and blood, a poor investment. He said the genetic lottery would be more favorable next time. She spat his own monstrous words back at him. The opulence of the room seemed to curdle the beautiful objects, turning grotesque in the face of such ugly truth. Julian finally broke. It wasn't a noble collapse, but a pathetic crumbling. A wretched sob tore from his throat as his legs gave out, and he sank onto a pristine white sofa, burying his face in his hands. Eleanor stared at her son, her face a mask of revulsion. The carefully constructed image of her powerful, perfect heir had been utterly demolished, replaced by the portrait of a monster. She walked slowly towards the sofa, not with comfort, but with the cold stride of a judge approaching the condemned. "Julian," she whispered, her voice trembling with a rage and shame so profound it seemed to shake her entire body. "Look at me." He wouldn't. He couldn't. "You have poisoned our name," she seethed, her voice low and venomous. "The Croft legacy, a thing I have dedicated my life to upholding. You have dragged it through the filth of your own cowardice. You are not my son. The creature I see before me, I do not know." That was the final fatal blow. It wasn't the law, or Amelia, or Marcus that defeated him. It was the judgment in his mother's eyes. Amelia watched the scene for a moment longer, a grim sense of closure washing over her. She had come for the truth, and the truth had proven to be a devastating weapon. She turned to walk away, her purpose here fulfilled. At the edge of the room, she paused and looked back, not at the sobbing wreck on the sofa, but at the rigid, heartbroken woman standing over him. "I will be sending my lawyer's contact information this evening," Amelia stated, her voice now crisp and professional. She was speaking their language now, the language of terms and consequences. "I expect a divorce settlement that reflects the true origins of your family's fortune. I will have sole, uncontested custody of my son Leo. If you or Julian challenge me on a single point, Marcus Vance's entire meticulously documented story, complete with bank records and forensic data, goes to every major financial news outlet on the planet. Your son's business will not survive it. Your family's name will become a synonym for theft and cruelty." She didn't wait for a reply. She turned her back on the wreckage and walked out of the penthouse. The heavy door clicked shut behind her, sealing them in their gilded tomb. The elevator's soft ding upon its arrival sounded like a bell of liberation. As the doors slid open on the ground floor, she stepped out of the chilled artificial air of the building and into the warm, real air of the city. The sun was bright, and for the first time in a very long time, so was her future. 6 months later, the world was a different color. The passage of time had washed away the muted, sterile grays of the penthouse and the hospital, replacing them with the warm, vibrant hues of a life being truly lived. Amelia's new home was not a declaration of wealth, but a sanctuary of peace. Tucked away on a quiet, tree-lined street, the 3-room walk-up apartment was bathed in the golden light of the afternoon sun, which streamed through large, old-fashioned windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, happy sprites. Where the penthouse had been characterized by a cavernous, intimidating silence, this apartment hummed with the gentle symphony of life. The air smelled of baby powder, the lingering scent of oil paints from the canvases Amelia had begun working on again, and the faint, sweet aroma of the lemon cake cooling on the kitchen counter. Instead of the distant, impersonal hum of city traffic 50 stories below the open windows, brought the sounds of children playing in the park across the street and the cheerful chirping of sparrows. At the center of it all, in a soft playpen, bathed in a rectangle of sunlight, was Leo. He was magnificent. At 6 months old, he was a chubby, gurgling bundle of joy, his cheeks round and rosy. The faint, silvery scars on his tiny torso were the only remaining evidence of his tumultuous entry into the world. His lungs, once the source of so much terror, were now strong, powering a robust cry when he was hungry, and more often a laugh that was the most precious sound Amelia had ever heard. He was the living, breathing embodiment of her victory, a testament to a mother's refusal to surrender. Amelia sat on a comfortable, slightly worn armchair, watching him. In these quiet moments, she would sometimes let her mind drift back to the woman she had been. The woman who had believed Julian's focused intensity was a sign of passion, not pathology. The woman who had mistaken luxury for love. She didn't feel bitterness towards that version of herself anymore, only a gentle maternal pity. That Amelia had been an acquisition, a beautiful bird in a gilded cage valued for her plumage and her ability to sing on command. She had almost forgotten the strength of her own wings. Looking at Leo, who had just managed to grab his foot and was examining it with profound fascination, she felt a love so vast and unconditional it was a physical presence in the room. It was nothing like the fragile, transactional affection Julian had offered. This love was a fortress. It was an anchor. It was real. The divorce had been finalized with a cold, silent efficiency that spoke volumes of Julian's fear. Faced with the irrefutable evidence Marcus held and the crushing weight of his mother's condemnation, Julian had capitulated on every single demand. The settlement was substantial, a figure that would ensure she and Leo would never have to worry about money again. But to Amelia, it wasn't a lottery win. It was restitution. It was the price of a stolen algorithm. The penalty for a decade of lies and the blood money Julian had been willing to save by sacrificing his son. She had taken a portion of it, and with Marcus's quiet guidance, established a foundation. She called it Leo's Light. Its mission was simple: to provide immediate financial grants to families who, like her, were facing the terrifying diagnosis of CDH and the crippling costs of fetal surgery. The first thank you letter she had received, a tear-stained note from a young couple in Ohio, was taped to her refrigerator. It meant more to her than all the diamonds Julian had ever bought her. As for Julian himself, he had simply faded. Chloe, ever the journalist, would occasionally forward her a clipped headline. Croft Enterprises stock plummets amidst leadership re-evaluation. Billionaire Julian Croft sells Hampton's estate. He had become a ghost in his own life, an outcast rattling around an empty penthouse, a king whose subjects had all abandoned him. Amelia felt nothing when she read them. He was a chapter she had finished reading. The sound of a key in the lock brought her back to the present. The door opened, and Marcus Vance walked in, carrying a bag of groceries in one arm and smiling when he saw her. His presence in her life was as steady and comforting as the afternoon sun. There was no grand sweeping romance, no Hollywood drama. Their bond was quieter, deeper, forged not in courtship, but in crisis. It was a friendship built on a foundation of mutual respect and a shared understanding of what it meant to be wronged by the same man. "I brought the good coffee," he announced, placing the bag on the counter, "and I think Leo has officially grown another chin since Tuesday." Leo, hearing Marcus's voice, let out an excited squeal and flapped his arms. Marcus's face softened as he walked over to the playpen and crouched down, offering his finger for Leo to grip with surprising strength. "Hey there, little fighter," Marcus murmured, "giving your mum a run for her money." Watching them, Amelia felt a profound sense of rightness. This was what family looked like. Not the performative perfection of the Crofts, but this easy, authentic warmth. This was a man who had faced his own destruction and chosen to rebuild himself not with bitterness, but with a steely sense of justice that had in turn saved her. Later, after Leo was asleep in his crib, his soft breaths filling the quiet apartment, Amelia and Marcus took 2 mugs of tea out onto the small balcony. It overlooked the park, and the setting sun was streaking the sky with brilliant strokes of orange, pink, and purple. They sat in a comfortable silence for a long time, watching the day end. "You know," Amelia said, finally, her voice soft, contemplative. "For the longest time, I thought wealth was about having everything. The cars, the clothes, the penthouse. I was so wrong." She turned to look at him, her eyes clear and full of a wisdom she had earned in the fire. "Wealth isn't about what you can buy. It's about what you would refuse to sell." Marcus held her gaze, and a genuine warm smile reached his eyes. He had heard her say it before, but the truth of it seemed to deepen with each repetition. It was the core lesson of their shared history. "And what you would fight to save," he added, his voice quiet but firm. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees below. The last sliver of the sun dipped below the horizon, but it left behind a sky glowing with beautiful lingering light. In that peaceful twilight, 2 survivors sat together, not in the ruins of their pasts, but in the quiet, hopeful dawn of a future they were building together, one built on a wealth that could never be counted, only felt. Amelia's incredible journey shows us that true strength isn't found in a bank account, but in the heart's refusal to give up. Her story is a powerful reminder that our real wealth lies in our integrity, our courage, and the love we fight to protect. Julian had millions of dollars, but he was poor in all the ways that truly matter. Marcus, who had lost a fortune, proved to be the richest man of all by choosing justice and compassion. What did you think of Julian's shocking decision? Could you ever forgive such a betrayal? And what about Marcus's incredible act of paying a debt by saving a life? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story of resilience, justice, and a mother's unwavering love moved you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear a story of hope, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories that will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Thank you for watching.